as green, responsible housing. They said that we would not be able to have, with progressive leadership, economic resurgence. Well, the city of Chicago is #1 again as it relates to our airport. It's the busiest airport in America. We had 3.5 million people visit our city last summer, the most amount of visitors in the history of Chicago downtown, almost $1 billion of new revenue. We have an incredible big project on the southeast side of Chicago, PsiQuantum, the first place in America where this new form of technology will develop. On the west side of Chicago, right outside the United Center, it's called the 1901 Project, where thousands of construction jobs available as we build affordable communities all around the United Center on the west side of Chicago. Look, I can go on and on about the work that we've done. I believe what people should expect from progressive leadership in this moment is to be consistent and committed to our values. And that's it. There will be people who will push back against the work that we've done. We've expanded paid time off in our city, 10 days off for workers. That's over 1 million workers that have time off. We've abolished the sub-minimum wage, right? We have done everything that I promised that I would do to build the safest, most affordable big city in America. And of course, you're going to have corporate interests that are spending millions of dollars to interrupt our progress. Right. The reason why we have experienced such a difficult time in Chicago is because there are a number of individuals that are more comfortable with the status quo of closing schools, closing mental health clinics, which I've reopened, shutting down the Department of the Environment, which I've reopened. Every single progressive value that people in this country have called for, we have delivered on that. The challenge, of course, that we'll have, and I'm going to say this is what Senator Sanders as well as Senator Warren said to me when I first got elected. They said, Mr. Mayor, you're going to have to tell your own story. And that's why this interaction is so important.
So you're up for re-election in February of 2027. You're essentially in your election cycle right now, if we look at it as a year long. The city council passed a city budget that you've not signed. What do you think about that? And is that an indication that you've got a rough year ahead trying to get reelected?
Well, I mean, look, Chicago politics is always going to be rough, no matter what. And that's just sort of the nature of our democracy. But what I will say, though, is that historically, we've had city councils that have been rubber stamps to previous administrations, and it led to the highest property taxes in the history of Chicago. We sold off public assets, particularly our parking meters, which, not even arguably, is the worst municipal financial deal in the history of America, right? So we know when we have rubber stamp city councils, that's not good for working people. What I put forth in my budget, I made it very clear we have to put together a budget that protects all of Chicago. 98% of what I propose is in the budget. You know what the difference was? I believe that we should have placed taxes on large corporations to balance the rest of that budget out. 30 city council members decided to sell debt of working people and poor people over towards a private entity to raise the last bit of revenue to balance that budget. We literally had a budget debate in the last 2 weeks of that budget being passed over less than 2% over the overall budget. We were able to protect people from garbage fees being raised. We stopped that. They were trying to, limit the number of jobs for young people. We stopped that. We were able to protect property tax value. And so there are good things in this budget. But again, there's a clear difference between me and progressive leadership, where we are challenging the ultra rich, whether it's through a millionaire's tax, a digital ad tax, taxing these corporations that receive the largest tax break in the history of America at the expense of healthcare. We can challenge those entities and the ultra wealthy, or we can continue the status quo, balancing this budget off the backs of working people. I made a commitment as a progressive leader that I'm going to protect working people, and that's exactly what I'm going to continue to do.
Before we wrap up here, let's